was a time that I swore I would never go back. I was blind to the truth, didn't know what I had. I was running, I was searching, but every place I turned for healing left me more broken than the last. Take me back to the place that feels like home, to the people I can depend on, to the faith that's in my bones. Take me back to a preacher and a verse where they've seen me at my worst, to the love I had at first. Oh, I wanna go to church. Trying to walk on my own, but I'm wound up lost. Now I'm making my way to the foot of the cross. It's not a trophy for the winners, it's a shelter for the sinners, and it's right where I belong. Take me back to the place that feels like home, to the people I can depend on, to the faith that's in my bones. Take me back to a preacher and a verse where they've seen me at my worst, to the love I had at first. Oh, I wanna go to church. I wanna go to church.
Welcome to St. Mark's online service this morning. It's so wonderful to have you joining us. For those of you that don't know, our in-person services at church have resumed. So if you would like to book for the service, please follow the link below. It's a nice, easy booking system for you to book, and you'll be able to join us in person again. We can't wait to see you. So not all training is good, and not all fighting is bad. What if you're training in a gang or a cult? That's not good. Maybe fighting. What is it that you are fighting for? It could be your marriage or your family. You could be fighting for integrity or your morals, and that is worth fighting for. So our human nature and our default setting is wired to train every day for the wrong things, and sometimes we get lost in a cycle of really bad habits that are ungodly. If you're not conscious of it, you'll train for an undesirable future every day and then wake up and wonder, how did I get there? Well, today Warren's message, what are you training for? Infidelity or purity? Are we training for disaster, or are we fighting for faithfulness?
So have you ever caught yourself saying, but that's immoral? I don't know what it was. Something that you think shouldn't happen. Something that's like, it's so obvious that that's wrong. And you know what happens? There's something that sets off your immorality siren. So I don't know, maybe for you it's corruption. Maybe it's greed, what we dealt with last week. Maybe it is when people are oppressed or taken advantage of. Maybe it's cruelty. When are you going to say, but that's immoral, it shouldn't be like that? And you know what else? We're pretty quick. When it gets to things like discrimination, racism, it makes our blood boil. And especially when innocent people are taken advantage of, or animals. And then we also want to say, you know what? It's not actually the amount when it comes to corruption or greed or whatever. It's the principle that counts. Whether it's 2 rand or 2 million, it's immoral, it's wrong. And what about sexual immorality? And where do we stand with that? Because if it's the principle that counts, well then we've got a lot of work to do. Because our society has a very different view on this topic. And I want to make sure that as believers, as those who are walking in Christ, I want to make sure that we are not training for the wrong things and falling into the trap that the world is so happy for us to fall into. So looking at this topic, lust, lewdness, lasciviousness, those are Bible words, big Bible words, all about sexual immorality, looseness, loslappiness, and now we laugh about it because now it's funny. And what about that principle, whether it's 2 rand or 2 million? Because if we're not aware of it, we will end up somewhere where we don't want to be. And then we're going to ask the question, how did I get here? But we've been training for it all along. So this is a really broad topic that we're dealing with today. And I want to clarify just right up front that we are going to focus on this series, on what this series is about. So we are looking at what we're training for and what we actually want to fight for. We're not going to deal with all of the other topics that this might include, things like pornography addiction or the psychological damage of premature exposure to sexual relations. We're not going to be looking at sexual identities and orientations or even sex crimes. Like, really, there's a lot to deal with. So please, I understand it is a very, very, very difficult topic, but this is very, very, very important. And it's something that we want to make sure that we don't ask that question. How did I get here? There is a deception that has taken place that unfortunately the majority of mankind has fallen victim to. And that deception is where it takes God's beautiful creation, which was good, because that's what God does. He creates things that are beautiful and good, and then the enemy comes along. And the devil is not a creator, as we've always said. He's an imitator. And what he does is he takes what is good and he distorts it. He makes it into something ugly. That's how he operates. And we want to make sure that we're not going to fall victim because we know his tricks. We know what he's going to do. There is something where mankind was given an incredible gift by God. And that really was God's idea, that a man and a woman should be together. So in a relationship that benefits them mutually and that there is a physical aspect to that. That's God's idea. It literally is the very first story of human relationship. That's how fundamental it is. And because it's that fundamental, the enemy knows that if he wants to rock society, if he wants to shake the very fabric of what God has created, well, that's where he's going to attack. He's going to attack at that very core, that very fundamental place. So to have a healthy and a mutually beneficial marriage relationship, that's work. That's sometimes a lot of work. Sometimes a lot of really difficult work. And I want to encourage you, that's normal. It is normal for us to put in a lot of work into the things that really matter, because it's worth it. This is not a topic that is spoken of often from a public platform, and that's because it's personal. It's very personal. It's probably the most personal topic that you could speak about. But it's not just that it's personal, it's also that it's very private, and that it needs to be protected. Unfortunately, though, it also needs to be dealt with. And so I'm asking just for some understanding. I'm asking for maturity, and I'm asking that as we deal with this, that we do take it personally, but don't become defensive or sensitive about it. Just understand the importance of it and the value that it has. We think that sexual desire and the main purpose of physical intimacy is either to populate the planet, so children, or it is for pleasure. So now what we've done is we've created these really sophisticated contraceptives, birth control, very, very effective. So now it's almost like we've dealt with the populating the planet part, so we've got that under control, right? So then what's left? Well, pleasure. So then that must be the main purpose of physical intimacy. And what happens is we get hooked into thinking that that is the main purpose. So when you look at sexual desire, it's even listed, so from like a psychological perspective, as one of mankind's basic needs. Like it's there with eating, with drinking, and with sleeping. A basic natural desire. And I'm not necessarily debating that, because I think there is an element to that. But what I am asking is the fact that it is a desire doesn't mean that we can say, oh, well, you know what, I'm human and I need this, I must have it. Because then that would mean we would look at eating and say, well, I can eat unhealthily, I can be morbidly obese and have health issues. No, it means that because I have a desire to drink, well, then I can drink alcohol and become completely inebriated and have my body suffer. No, and in exactly the same way, for physical intimacy and sexual desire, that the need is there, doesn't mean that it can be distorted. It means that we need to be healthy about it and to understand what God's intended purpose is. I don't think that our society has forgotten what the initial purpose of physical intimacy is. I don't think our society ever knew to begin with. So when we look at its purpose, the reason for it, the existence of it, it is there to physically exemplify, to personify unity, togetherness, and oneness. That is the purpose of physical intimacy. And this reading from Matthew chapter 19, where the Lord is answering the Pharisees' questions, and he really just goes back to the basics, all the way back to Genesis. Matthew 19, verse 4 to 6, he says, he answered and he said to them, have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female? And he said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. For what reason? For this reason, that the two shall become one flesh. So then, they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate. What is the emphasis of that? What is the purpose of that? It is the unity, the oneness, and the togetherness. And I think if we don't see physical intimacy in that light, well, then we're training for the wrong thing. And I'm afraid we've been training for the wrong thing for too long. And it's time to start fighting for what really matters. The sad reality is that sex sells. Lust is a lucrative business. In fact, if you go look at some of the stats, really difficult to get stats on this. But if you look at some of the stats, the pornography industry makes more money than all of the live sport combined. This is an American thing. So NBA, NFL, all of those, pornography makes more money than those. So this is serious business, sadly. And if we are either willingly, consciously, or subconsciously, I don't know, but if you willingly or not so willingly are setting yourself up, then you're going to fall into the trap of sexual temptation. And that trap leads to absolute destruction. So when we look at what we have to deal with, pornography, and when I'm saying pornography, I'm not talking necessarily just the hard, like really hard stuff. I'm speaking about all of it. Pornography, it's like Wi-Fi. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. So when you go to a restaurant, you go to a hotel, you go anywhere, you say, what's the Wi-Fi password? Well, it's almost the same as saying, what's the Wi-Fi password? And what sexually explicit song am I going to be exposed to whilst I'm sitting here? Or what sexual innuendos are going to be in the advertising that I'm going to see? It's everywhere. So we have to deal with this, not just on a daily basis like it's a once-off thing. You have to deal with this almost in every single moment of the day. And if you don't have the right filters, if you don't have the right walls up, well, it just floods. So when we say that this is a serious issue, if you look at the entertainment industry, and I'm not speaking about the pornography industry, I'm speaking about mainstream entertainment. If you look at humor, at what is classified as humor, if you look at just the general conversations that people have, if you look at music, how much sexual innuendo, and then you get to things like addiction to pornography. And I want to encourage you, if you haven't ever, go read Proverbs chapter 7. And just go and see what it means to have your liver pierced because of sexual desire. The inevitable, inescapable consequence of pursuing lust is gut-wrenching, soul-destroying, liver-piercing, mind-numbing, spirit-paralyzing agony. That is the inevitable, inescapable result of pursuing lust. So I want to paint this picture of a normal couple. By normal, I'm not saying that this is what should be normal. But what happens, there are unresolved issues in their relationship, and there's disunity in areas, core areas of their relationship, and then they'll get to a social setting, and they will be disrespected publicly. So the husband will say something demeaning to the wife, or the wife will disrespect the husband. And on top of that, then there's innocent flirting in social settings. Now, please, if there was ever an oxymoron, two words that are opposite that are together, then please explain innocent flirting if it's not with your partner. So this couple, this normal couple, so flirting happens and nobody says anything, it's just like whatever. Then there are no filters on the media or the inputs that they have, so they're not bothered. Watch anything, doesn't matter, watch it together. Then on top of that, there is occasional, apathetic, non-intimate intercourse. And that's the marriage relationship. How much of that is normative within our society? I want to give this definition of lust. Sexual pleasure outside of God's intended purpose. So if the goal is not unity, then any sexual pleasure outside of that is lust. And what happens, the further down you go, the more extreme it becomes, the more extreme the consequences are. And those get really difficult to live with. And that's what we want to avoid. Let's stop training for that. I'm going to use just this as a small example. So maybe you get invited to a staff function, year-end function, and either with your husband, wife, and for the first time, you see how they interact with their co-workers. And there's something that makes you feel uneasy. The way that they speak or the way that the others speak to them, you can just see in the eyes, the body language. We're experts at this, at noticing these things, especially if it's going to make you feel uncomfortable. So what happens is maybe then afterwards, or maybe at the event, you speak to your partner and you say, whoa, what's going on there? Like, I don't like what I'm seeing. Now, it's so easy, and again, it's so normative, for that to be dismissed as, oh, please, you're overreacting. Oh, please, it's innocent flirting. And I want to say, when you are uncomfortable about it, in that area, and you feel that it is affecting the primary relationship that society is built on, which is your marriage relationship, then please don't take it lightly. Don't dismiss it. It's not going to go away because it's highlighting something that needs to be dealt with. And I want to encourage you, once you've identified it, then communicate about it properly and openly. Try not to be sensitive, try not to be defensive or aggressive, because this is really important. You might not even realize that that's how you're interacting with people, but you're training. You're training for a day that you don't want to get to. And this is now an opportunity to say, okay, hang on. So let's be serious about this, because it really is serious. What might be seen as innocent flirting. If you can, have the conversation, account for it, and then I want to say there needs to be appropriate action that is taken. And you can discuss this in your own context, but maybe going and speaking to the other person. So the person that you've interacted with that's inappropriate, go and speak to them and just say, look, I'm sorry if that's how it came across, and that's not my intention at all, and I wouldn't ever want it to be that. Now, how does that make you feel? That's uncomfortable. That's having to go to an area that maybe you don't want to speak to them about. And you get all of these perceived reactions in your mind. Oh, they're going to laugh. They're going to think I'm being silly. They think I'm overreacting. They're going to think that my partner is overbearing, and they're going to mock and tease. And I just want to tell you, I'm not saying that those might not be a reality, but I just want to tell you that those are nothing in comparison to the consequences that will come if you don't deal with this properly. So rather deal with that, because comparatively speaking, that's way better. And you know what? That work colleague or that friend, they might actually just respect you for the step that you've taken, for the value that you've placed on your relationship. And if they don't respect you, good news, your partner will respect you. Because in those moments, when that flirtation is seen, or where a message is read, and it makes your partner feel uncomfortable, well, the respect has diminished. What's happened is that your closeness is now further apart, and the trust is starting to crack. So those are the things you don't want to toy with. You don't want to leave those unresolved. Those are the areas that you really want to speak about and to deal with in a healthy way. I know that for each of us, those moments, they're not pleasant, but they're important. And that's where we need to have that courage and that faith to say, do you know what? My priority is to please the Lord in everything that I do. And by dealing with this, I'm pleasing Him. For the spiritual component of what we have to deal with, we're looking very much at the physical component today, because that's what this topic is really about. And for that physical component to be a healthy part of your relationship, it requires multiple areas within your relationship to be healthy in the confines of a stable and legal and secure bond, which is what we call marriage. And I want to just share and elaborate a little bit on this. So this is when a man and a woman physically personify their unity. And that unity is not just in the physical aspect. That unity is about your emotional intimacy. It's the fact that you are close emotionally, that you care about each other, that you don't just ignore each other. You're not callous and cold towards each other emotionally, but you really want to find out and help and walk the road together. It's about intellectual intimacy, that you stimulate each other intellectually in your conversation. And sometimes that's not easy. The emotional part's definitely not easy. The intellectual part is sometimes also not easy, and it requires a lot of effort and work. But it's important that you can sit and enjoy the conversation with each other. And maybe you're going to find it's not always like that. Well, then work on it and find ways to make it interesting. It also includes spiritual intimacy. And that means that you speak about the things that really matter, that you're on the same path, on the same road, heading in the same direction spiritually. It doesn't mean that your partner has to do everything that you do at the same time that you do it, but it means that you have a personal relationship with the Lord, and so do they. And that you speak about it and you do things together, coming to church, watching online, reading a Bible plan together. But you have that spiritual closeness, that at least you've had the discussion with each other. So what do you really think about this? How did that impact you? What did you think about that message? How did you find it? What are you going to do? So you're not having any of those. Then, okay, on top of that, you also are not united in your family issues. You're not united in your financial issues. You're not united in your social issues. You're not united in your view of the future. So there's no unity in any of that. And then you're expecting physical intimacy, which is the pinnacle of unity. And you know what happens? When you shortcut and you just keep going there as a default, or as that's just what it is, or I don't know, but you don't deal with any of these things, well, you're never going to deal with them. Because the ultimate goal to have healthy intimacy is in every single area. And the pinnacle of that is the physical. And if that's how we can see it, it forces us to deal with these areas that sometimes are very easy to ignore, and then to manipulate, play games and whatever, so that we can get whatever outcome we want. And that really is the challenge. The challenge is to work on every single area, because that's what builds trust. So I want to say, if we can define the objective, the purpose of physical intimacy is the demonstration of unity, of togetherness, and of oneness between a man and a woman in marriage. If that's the purpose, if that's the point, well, then what's the opposite? Well, the opposite is when that oneness is cheap, it's outside of marriage, it's multiple partners, it's fake, it's unhealthy, and all it really is, it's the lustful pursuit of pleasure, well, then you're never going to work on the tough stuff. And when you've shortcutted or you've distorted love to lust, well, then you're going to minimize the entire value of your relationship. And that's how I want us to see it, because that's how important it is. If you're going to keep pursuing lust only for pleasure's sake, because you think that's the ultimate goal and the purpose of it, if that's what you're going to do, and you're training for the wrong goal, and I'm going to say, just stop. Just stop. Because you're not getting away with it, even if nobody knows. You're training to win in a game where there are only losers. This verse from 1 Corinthians chapter 6. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 18 to 20. Flee sexual immorality. Every sin that a man does is outside the body, but he who commits sexual immorality sins against his own body. Or do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have from God, and you are not your own? For you were bought at a price. Do you have any idea what that sentence means? That the Lord Jesus Christ paid the ultimate price for you. That he gave his life for you, God Almighty. Because here's another oxymoron. God died. 2 words, opposite, should never be together. But he did. And I'm saying, if that's the price that God was willing to pay, and he's linking that to our sexual purity, well, then that's pretty serious. You were bought at a price, therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. I want you to go back and read that verse and spend some time and really ask yourself some of those questions. Is that how I see my life? Do I see that I don't belong to myself, that I'm not just here to fulfill my own desires, that I'm really here to fulfill God's will for my life because I've been bought with a price? To glorify God in your body. Watching or listening to age-restricted entertainment that is rated for sexual content or for nudity. Exposing yourself to pornography or even innocent flirting or shortcutting intimacy in your marriage or sharing inappropriate content via messaging or engaging in crude and degrading conversations in the guise of humor. That's all training for disaster. Let's stop. Now, I don't know if that sounds extreme to you, where I'm saying, don't expose your mind to anything that has lust as a part of it, which is not part of God's original purpose. It's not getting you anywhere close to unity. I'm saying, don't expose your mind to that at all. And you might say, "Yo, Warren, like how? Like it's just everywhere and everybody watches and everybody does this. And you know what? I'm going to be seen as like such a weirdo." And it's like, and I'm saying, okay. So it only sounds extreme because the comparison is not clear. So when you understand that God's purpose for this entire thing is so beautiful, so important, so fundamental, and that purpose is unity. That's the point. Well, if you don't get that, then I understand. It's easy to see that these other things, they're innocent, it's not that bad. But when it's highlighted like that, then surely we have to see, hang on, what is the purpose of this? Because that's taking me somewhere that I don't want to end up at the end of that road. If pleasure is the sole purpose of what you are pursuing, there is a problem. Because lust is when I fulfill my selfish desires with pleasure. God is always going to emphasize the other side, the unity. And the enemy is always going to emphasize the other side, which is the lust and the pleasure. And we need to be able to see that clearly and say, no, hang on. I'm not part of that. I'm not training for that because I don't want what that brings. In the one, you are going to get pleasure, but only in its very temporary, in its very fleeting, very shallow, and often degrading form. That's all you're going to get. And you're never, ever going to get God's intended purpose, which is unity. You can't. They are mutually exclusive. So when we go down that path and we train and we pursue pleasure with lust, well then you get ugliness instead of beauty. You get filthiness instead of purity. You get selfishness instead of sacrifice. And you get lust instead of real love. So how are we going to protect this? Because your sexual purity is worth fighting for, more than what you could ever imagine. When I understand that this is God's purpose and it's intended for marriage, and I'm going to drive this point to home, and maybe you're going to say, oh, Warren, that's such an outdated perspective, that it's only for marriage, shouldn't be outside of marriage, shouldn't be before marriage. Like, wow, like what are we, like in the 1950s here? You don't understand society. Like, that's not how people operate. That's not relationships these days. And I'm just going to say, it's not me saying this. So it's not my opinion. I'm just going to highlight the difference in purpose. So often what the excuse is, it's, well, we just want to see if we're compatible before getting married or not, physically compatible. And I'm saying, if physical compatibility was the goal, then maybe I could understand it. But let's just be clear here. Physical compatibility is not the goal. So what we are looking for here is intimacy in all areas of your relationship. And when you're going to shortcut that by going directly to the physical part, which is literally, there is nothing more personal, nothing more intimate. If you're going to shortcut and go there straight away, you're not going to deal with the other stuff. And how many times does the story have to get told? That these areas then just lay dormant. And I'm saying, if compatibility is what you're looking for, then please, I agree with that. So just find out, are you emotionally compatible? Are you socially compatible? Are you spiritually compatible? Do you have unity in your goals, your ideas? Are you heading in the same direction? Because here's the reality of it. If you're not willing to work on those areas and find your compatibility in those areas, then what's going to happen here? Whether you're compatible or not, it's irrelevant. So that compatibility, rather spend time there before shortcutting. Because what happens when we say compatibility, compatibility is not about two unchanging things and to see if they fit. That's not how it works, because life changes, situations change, people change. So if we are looking for compatibility, then it's a very difficult thing just to look at only one area. But if we want to say that, can people change? Absolutely. Can situations change? Absolutely. So can physical compatibility. That's the reality. And here's the most important part. What you work on changes. So rather spend time working on all of those areas and let them contribute to what God intends. Faithfulness needs filters. You need to be able to put up filters on all of your inputs, eyes, ears, touch. You need to make sure that you are guarding what is important and what is sacred. Purity needs protection from those external influences as well as the internal desires. And this is what James writes in James 1:13. He says, "Let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. And then when desire has conceived, it's given birth. It gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, brings death." And that could be the death of your relationships. It could be the death of your family as a unit. You know what the scriptures say? Flee, run. Don't flirt with these things. 2 Timothy 2 verse 22, "Flee youthful lusts, pursue righteousness and faith and love and peace with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart." What is it that you are protecting? Well, you're protecting everything that you hold dear. That's how important this is. You're protecting your family. You're protecting your partner. You're protecting your own body. You're protecting your soul, your spirit. You're protecting your future. It's worth protecting. It's worth fighting for. So when we say we have to stop training for infidelity. That means that we have to stop condoning and supporting and promoting and participating in anything and everything that has lust and pleasure as the goal, especially when it is at the expense of God's original divine purpose, which is unity. So I'm saying maybe it's time that we have those tough conversations, and it's going to be uncomfortable. And it's going to start with you. You're going to ask yourself, am I glorifying God with my body? Can I answer that question truthfully and honestly? And then ask yourself, or have I fallen to the enemy's trap? Am I a victim of my own doing? Maybe once you've had those conversations, it's really good to just ask and to be honest. Speak to the Lord about it. And then what you really want to do is you want to speak to your partner about this. So if you're in a marriage relationship, or if you're courting or in any relationship, just have this conversation. And just ask, is what we have lust or love? Is this the pursuit of pleasure or unity? And are we ignoring other areas of our relationship because we don't have unity in them, but we keep shortcutting because we don't want to deal with those difficult areas? I don't know, maybe as a couple, this could be like a couple recon. It could be a couple reunion as well. And we just want to ask that question. What are we training for? Are there things that we have allowed that we are training for something that we don't want? Let's rather fight for what really matters. And then I want to say hashtag real couple goals. Maybe you're part of the older generation and you might not feel this applies as directly to you. But there is such an incredible and beautiful role that you have to play. That role where you can take a stand. You can speak up and speak out against what society says is normal. And you can just say, whoa, whoa, whoa. There is something so much better, something so beautiful. Don't be a victim to the enemy's tactics. And you can encourage those around you. What an incredible role that is to play. And maybe for those who are single, who are not in a relationship, well, what are you setting yourself up for? What are the standards that you are going to uphold? How are you going to ensure that unity is the ultimate goal of physical intimacy? And that means that you're going to have to stop training and you're going to have to fight. You're going to have to fight for those things of meaning. I want to finish with this verse from 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and let it sink in. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but it rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love, real divine love, never fails. Father, we know that there are so many areas of our lives that we are influenced in the wrong way. And Father, there's not a single one on this planet who is not affected by this. And so I pray, Father, that we would see how important this is to you, that you would use your Son's sacrifice as a motivator to protect what is sacred and important, the bond between a man and a woman. And so, Father, help us to see that when that bond is healthy and strong, that is what society is built on. That is what makes children who are capable, children who are secure. And so, Father, may we put that right at the top of our list to ensure that unity is the ultimate goal. I want to pray, Father, for those who feel that they have fallen victim. And I want to ask, Father, that you would give to them the courage to come clean, the courage to speak up, to seek help, and the courage to stop. And Father, thank you that is made possible when we reach out to you, because you give us the power over sin and temptation through Christ. That when we can see ourselves in Him, that's what makes life different. And so I pray, Father, for each of us, and I pray that we would fight for what matters, that it would glorify you in our lives, in our body, and in our spirit. Amen.
Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? I was lost, but He brought me in. Oh, His love for me. Oh, His love for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free. He has ransomed me, His grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, He died.